If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this. Graveyard shift workers, what is the weirdest/creepiest thing you've witnessed while working at night? I used to work the night shift at a nursing home. The entire experience in and of itself was terrifying. I'd be sitting at the nurse's station between bed checks and someone's call light would go off. It's pitch black in this nursing home except a few lights on here and there for you to see. You get up, pager in hand, and head to the room, only to be ambushed by the old man with Alzheimer's who thinks it's time for breakfast. And during the lull, you're constantly checking the hallways, flipping lights on and off, swearing you're always hearing Mr. Old Man's breathing, even though you just put him back to bed. You know how people think Five Nights at Freddy's isn't real? Ha! Bullshit. I used to do graveyard shifts at a suicide hotline. We covered only a small city, so unless at the holidays, the busy season, there was only one person on at night to man the phones. The organization that ran the hotline wasn't based out of some office building. Instead, it was an old house that had been converted. The phone room was in the basement. We had a person who was a repeat caller, and interestingly enough, used to actually work at the hotline. Anyway, he used to call only during the graveyard shifts, and the calls would start off normal, but then he would start to ask personal questions. Then he would tell whoever was on the phone that he was in the building. He would say how he got in, climbed through a window, and he would say that he was in the top level of the building, and about to make his way downstairs. Imagine the movie Scream, however this was in the early 90s before that movie even came out. It was terrifying when he would call. I am a security officer who has worked overnight on multiple occasions. I was doing security at a dog food manufacturing company in the middle of September. Because this site is an industrialized area, I am literally the only person in the middle of BFE basically running security on millions of dollars worth of machinery. Anyways, the security office is a shed, about 15 feet by 12 feet. The shed is outside a gated and barbed wire fence. There is only one road that leads to and out of the factory, and it's about 800 feet long before a big old bend which eventually leads to a road in the middle of nowhere. One light inside the shed and very quiet. I was watching a movie about 2:30. When I hear some rustling outside the shed. I open the door, nobody around. 30 minutes later, there is a legitimate knock at my shed. I grab my weapon, nobody should be in the area till 7 a.m. I open the door and nobody is there again. I called HQ to ask if I was supposed to meet someone there and explained what happened. They said nobody would be there. Which immediately alarmed me. 4 a.m. rolls around and I have to do a patrol. I open the door and about 500 feet down the road was a person. Just standing in the middle of the road. Not moving. Simply standing, in the middle of nowhere. And he had something in his hand. However, it was dark and he was far. I took one step out of the shed, one step, and the figure started sprinting toward me. Quickly, I shut the door and peer outside the window. I drew my weapon again and simply pointed at the door. Now, as if this wasn't weird enough, I'm sitting and waiting for anything when all of a sudden, the sky started to get really bright. Slowly but surely, it got brighter and brighter and brighter, like it was 9 a.m. Then, just as suddenly as the light came, it was gone. I never saw the figure, I don't know where the light came from, but that shit lit up the sky completely. Was working at an alternate assignment on night shift. I was not at my office, but at a shared station inside a secure facility. The company has a voice-operated receptionist that will direct outside callers to the appropriate extension. This extension is not part of that system as nobody owns it. Anyone calling for me would have been directed to my empty office. About 1 to 2 a.m. my phone rings. The call display is very strange. The number is not a valid internal number. It is not a valid external number. It, along with the name, is a series of broken characters and bits of illuminated 7-segment display. Complete nonsense. Whatever. Phone system probably shit the bed and sent corrupted caller ID data. So I answered the phone. Nothing. Silence. Until it began. The Ghostbusters theme. In its entirety. Then silence. I have absolutely no idea. I worked nights at a hotel for 10 years. There is a stairwell that leads up to the 3rd floor meeting room, and once you get to the top you can simply glance to the left and see through the windows of the meeting room doors. I'm doing a quick walk around at 2 a.m. one night and I reach the top and glance left quickly and turn to the right to keep marching. But wait. The lights in the room were on and there was a middle-aged woman with long dark hair and a floral print dress sitting at a table staring out the window towards me. But there shouldn't have been. I turned back around and finished my double take. The room was dark, locked, and empty as it should have been. This was all in the space of 3 seconds, but I swear I saw someone in there. It still freaks me out to this day. I had a brief stint as a police officer in rural Wyoming. I elected to do plenty of night shifts because they were easy as fuck, usually called to maybe a bar fight at 2 a.m. or a DD shortly after. But mostly it was my partner and I sitting in the car bullshitting. Not to mention a summer night in Wyoming is something to be savored like a good wine. They are always beautiful and relaxing with a smell so fresh that it really is like a wine for your nose. We got a call one night about someone reporting suspicious activity, reporting what sounded like a woman screaming. We look at each other with an "oh boy, time to go arrest another wife-beating shitbag" look. We get there, and the woman reports her son had heard the screaming coming from a creek bed about half a mile from their house. She urges us to stay and hear it, and sure enough, a couple of minutes of sitting on their porch and it comes loud and clear from the creek bed. We head down there, shining flashlights everywhere, screaming and yelling, not wanting to surprise a mountain lion enjoying a late night snack run or the like. The scream is getting louder as we approach, each time there's maybe a couple minutes between them. We get to the creek bed, and the sound stops. We look at each other and shrug, blowing it off as a mountain lion, who have some truly creepy sounding calls. We start heading back to the house to tell the residents to relax. As we're heading back, the yell starts again. But it's not coming from the creek bed, it literally sounded like it was all around us, right on top of us. This was in a field with short prairie grass. Nothing could hide effectively that was large enough to make a sound like that. We shine our flashlights everywhere and can see nothing. But even as we're shining them everywhere, the sound continues. The frequency picked up since it came on top of us, to once every 15 to 30 seconds. It was really high-pitched, and loud enough to where each one hurt our ears. We look at each other. My partner's eyes are wide as hell and he tells me mine are as well. We were both freaked the fuck out. It's a moonless night with only our flashlights to light around us, with a noise that we cannot identify seeming to have followed us from the creek bed. As soon as we stepped out of the field and onto the dirt road, the screaming just stopped. It was totally silent. No crickets, no owls hooting, no frogs croaking. There was absolutely no sound, aside from our footsteps, like every animal there had been startled by something. At this point, we just decide to get the hell out of there and head back to the house to tell us if the yelling continues to call dispatch again, and we'll be right over. Thankfully they didn't call back. I'm a firefighter. One day we got a call at 3 a.m. for a CO alarm by an old woman who was a frequent flyer. We get there and she's just sitting up on the couch watching TV. Apparently this is normal for her to be up this late, so my two partners decide to look at the CO alarm and replace the batteries while I go outside and start up the air monitor. I get it set up and walk in the house, and my LT walks with me as we monitor the air. As we walk around we see a bunch of pictures of her deceased husband. He wasn't there, so I'm guessing. I went in every room, and we get to the kitchen. In the kitchen the stairs to the basement started there, and across from that opening was a door to the backyard. Now she lived in the country, so not many people were around her. So I continue monitoring and I go to the door to the backyard thinking it may be another room to check, and I look in the door's window when it just makes this loud slamming noise, like someone punched it, but no one was there. Just an empty field. My lieutenant heard this and was like, did the door just slam at you? I said yeah, so being the rookie, he said I can go in the basement by myself to check the air, and he'll meet up with my other partner talking to the lady. The basement was a Michigan basement and it was creepy as shit. Only had one light and a ton of antiques. So I zoomed through cause I was creeped out and went up to report there was no CO, and we advised her to buy new alarms. I then asked if she had any dogs, maybe I didn't see it jump on the door, and she said no. Why? I told her and she just calmly said, oh, that's Eugene, he's a ghost and moves stuff around and does things like that. I'm used to it. Never figured out anything else. Haven't been back, but that certainly was interesting. Really long story, but it's pretty intense and disgusting. I used to be an EMT. Worked 24-hour shifts, which had its perks: slow days where you literally got paid to sleep or eat or read, 4 days off every week, etc. It also had its downside. Getting out of bed to run a call at 1 a.m. or 3 a.m. sucks. Being sleep deprived sucks. Getting calls that are way outside your scope of practice sucks. One time, I got the perfect combination of these three situations. I had run call after with no downtime from sometime in the early morning to about 1 a.m. Just one of those really rare, super crazy days. Got back to the station, fell asleep immediately. 2 a.m. rolls around, I'm paged for a call at a nursing home a bit down the road for trouble breathing, emesis. Note, emesis is a fancy word for puke. I'm so loopy from lack of sleep, I don't really mentally prepare for a call of that nature. Truthfully, I'm thinking either a nurse at the facility or the paramedics with the fire department will get to the call before my partner and I. EMTs are bottom of the food chain in the county. I'm really expecting to walk in and find an elderly person a bit under the weather, and maybe take them to the hospital if the staff or the patient thinks it's that serious. Anyway, I hop in the rig and we head over to the nursing home. We go through the motions of unloading the gurney, checking for a room number, etc. I head down the hall and walk into the room just in time to see an elderly man, maybe 80s or 90s, sit straight up his bed and explode black, greasy vomit all over the room. Not like one heave either, this guy is spraying this shit everywhere. I was so caught off guard, it took me a second to even react and get to him. As I'm trying to assist the guy, suction the shit out of his mouth so he can breathe, get him on his side so he doesn't choke, etc. The black death is getting on my face, down my shirt. Everywhere. He's fucking panicking, grabbing my arms and making the worst noises I've ever heard. It was fucking chaos. Coffee ground emesis occurs when a patient has a lower gastrointestinal bleed, and the red color, I think the heme, has been digested by acid in the GI tract. This is a 911, lights and sirens, this shit is for real call, and the nursing home is called an independent, basic life support EMT company to handle it. Due to local scope of practice, I cannot push drugs, I cannot intubate, etc. I am a janitor trying to keep a dying man afloat. Amidst everything, I honestly remember stopping for a few seconds and just staring at my partner and waiting to wake up because there's no fucking way that any of it could actually be happening. Honestly, thinking I was having a nightmare because of all the craziness of such a busy day. Unfortunately, I was not asleep. Just as the guy totally fell out, the fire department came and took over. Due to patient confidentiality, I couldn't ever ask what the end result was, but I think I know how it ended. I was working security at a very large government building/compound on Graveyard. It is just shy of 1.5 million square feet, but they moved almost all of the agencies out, so even during the day there's about 150 employees, so the whole place is empty and very spooky. We would regularly hear weird stuff like footsteps or a small movement out of the corner of your eye. We would also have the motion detectors in certain locations go off late at night, and when you would go and check it out, some of the lights that also had motion detectors would be on even though you hadn't gone down that hallway in a while. So obviously everyone said that it had to be a ghost, and a lot of people refused to work there at night. Well, one night I was working with a guy that was a pretty big no-nonsense type of guy. He went down by the old child daycare area doing his normal round, but when he came back he was pale white, and looked like he had just seen a ghost, which is actually what he told me. He said he was just poking around, and when he turned a corner he saw a ghost at the end of the hallway just staring at him. Now we are armed, but this guy decided to just turn and run away when he saw it. After that incident we decided that we had to catch the ghost, so a few days later we assembled a team and went down there looking for this ghost. Well, we found it, but it turned out not being a ghost but a former employee of the building that had his home foreclosed on and had decided that it was a good idea to just sleep in the old daycare area since it wasn't used anymore. He got arrested and the guy that saw the ghost and ran off got fired. I was a janitor when I was younger. This was a huge building with several different companies in it. I was vacuuming the 10th floor when I see a computer turned on. I had passed it no more than half an hour earlier and all the screens were off. I figured I had bumped the desk or something earlier and woke it up. A few minutes later I get a call from my friend/coworker blaming me for trying to spook him. He was running a floor polisher in the lobby and apparently one of the elevators showed up with no one in it. Later that night we closed up the building, and after trying to activate the security system, it warned us that a door by the loading dock was open. Sure as hell, it was held open with a rolled up magazine. Neither of us would have done this. It was a secure building, requiring keycards for almost every door. Chills kind of go down my spine. We piece everything together and come to the conclusion that someone who should not have been up there was up there. With me. Alone. On the way down, we assumed they accidentally hit the lobby button, so they got off at another floor, then went down to the level B and snuck out the back. We immediately call the building manager. He hauls ass over and assesses the situation. Some higher-ups who were renting the office space show up freakishly fast. As I'm laying in bed, thoughts about who the fuck that was and what they were doing raced through my head. Someone stealing data? CIA? Did we catch a spook? The very next night, there were several security guards watching us like hawks. The entire situation was very odd, and very hushed. I used to work graveyard shift managing a hotel. Usually I was the only employee on premises during this shift, and because it was a nice hotel with mostly regular guests, I usually felt very comfortable. One night when I ran the night audit, I realized that the person working the shift before me let a man check into the hotel even though his credit card was declined. Normally that would be fine, we would just have to take a cash deposit in lieu of a credit card, but the person working before me failed to do so. It was about 1 a.m. and I needed to get a valid form of payment from the guest, so I called his room and asked him to come downstairs with either a valid credit card or cash. He came downstairs and told me he gave his credit card already and that even though it was declined that didn't matter. I explained again that it was declined, so not valid, and that he can either give another credit card or a cash deposit or he would need to leave. This conversation went in circles and I was becoming extremely frustrated. He started raising his voice at me and then threatened to rape me. I'm a short, petite girl in my 20s and this guy was tall and looked quite overpowering physically. He could easily have jumped over the counter. As soon as he threatened me, I ran into the back office, locked the door and called the police. They arrived quickly and I explained the situation and one of the officers escorted him to his room to get his belongings and then they made him leave. One of the officers stayed in the parking lot until my shift was over in case he tried to come back. I worked the night shift on an ambulance for a while. One night we got a call to take a mental patient from the ER back to her facility. She had thought she was having a heart attack or something. She was fine as far as I could tell. But a patient we ran into when we dropped her off freaked me the fuck out. We were at the nurse's station getting some paperwork done when out of the corner of my eye I see someone walk up and squeeze my partner's arm. He said hello very casually, so I figured it was a nurse he knew or something. It was 4 or 5 a.m. and I was too tired to care or even really look up. Then she walked around the stretcher and squeezed my arm. Her face still haunts me to this day. When I saw blank stare, I mean there was not a person behind it. Imagine the most intense uncanny valley feeling you've ever had and it will still pale in comparison to the feeling she gave me. There just wasn't anyone there. Terrifying. Worked midnights at a mental health inpatient unit. One night I take a shortcut to get to the pharmacy to get meds for a patient to be released. Pharmacy shut down at midnight and we wouldn't be able to get the sample so the patient could be released. This was sort of an unusual thing because patients weren't usually discharged at 11 p.m. which was the start of my shift, but the attending was running late that day due to some emergency. I take the shortcut through an area of the hospital that was once used as a transitional care unit for the elderly. The area has since been shut down because of low patient census. It was creepy because it looked like people had just up and left suddenly. The unit hadn't been cleared out and was eerie. Some items were being stored along the hallways, excess IV poles, beds, etc. This shortcut saved time because the only other way to get to the pharmacy was to go to the ground floor and back. As I walked through the semi-dark, abandoned hallway, just as I passed the nurse's station with all the call lights, a light goes off indicating someone has pushed the button in one of the rooms. The system was an older push-button system where the light would screech and light up to the corresponding room number. I sped through that hallway as fast as I could. I'm thankful that the call system wasn't more modern and equipped with sound. Currently at a graveyard shift for a security company. The creepiest thing I've seen is when I was doing a patrol around the building. It's at the edge of town surrounded by fields. I was walking back to the guard shack and there was a sound behind me like something bumped into the metal containers. I turn around and start walking to the sound, doing my job for once. I go to it and see nothing, then I hear a scuffle behind me. I'm freaked out and have my mag light in my hand, ready to swing. I turn around and there is nothing there, then I shine the light around and happen to catch a glimpse of a coyote. I've never been more scared of an animal before in my life. I asked the owner of the site and he said a pack of them made this location their home, and they are pretty brave and get close to humans every now and then. A few years ago I worked the overnight shift at a low-budget hotel in the middle of nowhere. I grew up in a busy city, so this country setting was already super creepy to me. The thought of being alone in the middle of nowhere is very unnerving. Anyway, one night I get a caller wanting to book several tombs and inevitably asked a bunch of questions about the hotel and amenities. Every other question he would drop a random "you sound very attractive" or "I can't believe they have you working the graveyard," etc., etc. Finally I was like, as nice as possible, "Are you going to book the room or what?" To which he scoffed and hung up. Whatever. The guy ends up calling every night I work for a week, each time trying to pretend to be someone else. He knew I knew and he had some weird excitement in his voice. After the third time I tell my boss, he gets the police involved and they set up some elaborate call tracking system. Suddenly Creepmaster 5000 stops calling for a few weeks and everything is back to its normal boring self. Train engineers and prostitutes. Suddenly one night I get the call. The guy doesn't even do his regular "oh, I'd like to book some rooms" bit, but instead tells me he's going to be seeing me really soon. I'm mildly bitchy, so I was like, yeah dude, sure. Confident that the patrolling police officer would be nearby. About 2 hours later I'm dicking around on the internet and look up and see a leering short guy about my age just fucking me from the other side of the counter. I didn't hear him come in and I just yelled oh shit. Before he snickered and bolted out of the lobby and back to his car. He was so creepy looking, akin to Elijah Wood's character from Sin City. It was a small town and I had never seen the guy before. I called the cops and they reviewed the tape and couldn't get his plate. I stopped working graveyard after that and never had a call from him again. I used to work nights at the hospital in the distribution warehouse. The warehouse is located in the basement next to the morgue, so the best possible place. I was in the warehouse getting supplies to take to the ER and all of a sudden I hear a record player turn on and it's playing some old country western type music. I found the source of the noise and it's coming from behind a locked door. The locked door leads to a small boiler room. There is only one entrance to that room and I am the only one in that warehouse. I take the supplies and promptly leave. It still gives me cold chills just thinking about it. I used to work as the night manager at my university student union. My job was to lock the doors around 10 p.m. and then let the cleaning people out/in. Occasionally I would make rounds of the building to make sure students and homeless people weren't sleeping in any of the rooms. Other than that there wasn't much to do. I got a lot of studying and Netflix in. One night I'm making rounds and I notice a cop standing outside on the colonnade poking at something with his nightstick. I shift around and I can see it's a freshman passed out drunk on the bench outside. For some reason he wasn't wearing shoes. We weren't too far from the dorms so I'd guess he either wandered away or his friends ditched him. So anyway, this cop is trying to rouse him. He gets the kid upright and he immediately pukes all over the cop's shoes. The cop looks pissed, but he lays the kid back down and starts talking into his radio. Over the next 10 minutes more cops show up, along with paramedics. I unlock the doors to let the paramedics cut through the building with the gurney. Of course, the kid pukes all over the goddamn floor inside the building, so I had to mop that up. I remember thinking that this was probably going to be the high point of the kid's day considering that he was going to wake up in the hospital and some kind of citation for puking on a cop. I work the late shift at a taco place, open until 1 a.m. Guy comes through the drive-thru with his GF and obviously has no idea what he's doing. We have to help him through the menu, not that uncommon. His order is pretty small, so I make it in a couple minutes and go to hand it out to him, just to find him lighting up a fresh bowl right at the window. This window, mind you, can see right into the kitchen where I'm making his order, so it's not like I could have appeared to be gone, but I open the window and he flips out, completely in a panic. He's looking around frantically trying to find what to do, pipe in one hand and baggie in the other, as if I'll just shout and the cops will come ripping into the drive-thru. He ends up just tossing both over to his GF and now she is panicking. Neither even consider the glove compartment, so she just kinda hides it between her legs, like a kid that stole some candy. I have obviously seen everything, but she looks up all doe-eyed, hoping she's in the clear. I just smile and hand them the food, wishing them a safe drive, then close the window. That must have been the biggest relief to them. Another night, after we close, I've taken off my headset and can no longer hear if cars are coming through the drive-thru. I find that one has when I see lights flashing through the window. It's a patrol car, and the officer inside says they're actively looking for a suspect in the immediate area. Said he's a large black male wearing Cookie Monster pajamas. I ask everyone and none of us have seen the guy, so the officer pulls off to search the lot. I thought it was funny, but my coworker would not go outside. Had to walk her to her car. I used to work in a theater as an usher, but part of the job included helping set up the stage and the gym, used as a warm-up stage for dancers. This theater was connected to my high school and was rented out during weekends for dance contests or other events. Usually we get our work done by midnight the night before, but for this certain event we were stuck there setting up until 4 a.m. So it's just me, my friend, our boss, and the janitor, and at around 1 a.m. the janitor starts to hurry up and pack her things and begins leaving. My friend and I asked my boss what her deal was, and he said on the first weekend of every month she claims she sees little people running around the high school halls. Now obviously my friend and I thought it was ridiculous, so we brushed it off and forgot about it until about an hour later we had to go into the high school section to get more chairs. While carrying chairs I hear the lockers rustle but pass it off as my friend brushing against them by accident, so I turned to tell him to stop trying to scare me. As I turned around I saw a small quick black blur pass through my field of vision and more locker rustling. My friend and I just looked at each other and calmly walked out of the high school area, all the while you would hear more slight locker movement. Once we were clear of the high school halls, we bolted to the only lit area in the building, which was the theater, and finished working as quickly and quietly as possible. Preface this by saying I'm a 5 feet 3 inches girl. Not large by any means. Was doing my thing as an assistant manager at Walmart, having a decent night. We had this guy, I'll call him Bob, who was working for me. Nice guy, very quiet, very large, but kept to himself. Had a weird laugh, but whatever. So I'm at the department manager's workstation in our back room. It's fairly hidden away in a corner of the store, far enough away that nobody is about to come running if I call out. Bob walks into the room, gives me this long look with this massive smile, and tells me that God loves me. Okay, so, Bob, how are you doing on your aisle? Almost done stocking? But no, he needs to tell me that God really, really loves me. Then he starts getting close enough to me that my back is against the wall, and he starts getting loud. Like, weird loud. God loves me, and he's screaming it in my face. God loves me more than anything, and he's screaming, and suddenly has a hand on my chest pinning me to the wall, and I'm trying to talk him down because if nobody is hearing him scream, nobody is going to hear me scream either. Suddenly he lets go, lays on the floor, and I kid you not starts flopping around. Not seizure, kind of like doing the worm, which sounds funny, but I was terrified. He's still screaming about God and flipping out all over the floor. I jump over him and run to get my lead maintenance, also a big guy who tends to be protective. Cool guy, sweet, massive. 6'2" at least. We'll call him Jack. So I run to get Jack, and I'm telling him that Bob is flipping out and to come quick. He looks at me weird but follows. We don't even get to the back room. Bob is now in the middle of the action alley, main hallway, screaming about God while still on the floor flopping around. Another associate standing there watching him in confusion. We pretty much stand there for 10 seconds thinking police? Ambulance? Both? When Bob suddenly stands up, apologizes, and decides to go back to doing his work. No. We escort him out of the building. He calls his wife from the parking lot, from behind the locked doors. Thank you very much, I felt freaking traumatizes. I report it to my boss, who tells me that as a company we try to do our best to help our associate when they're in these situations, and if he shows he's getting the help he needs, we may have to invite him back. And would I be okay with that? There's one answer. Suck it up if it comes down to it, and write him up for as many other things as possible to get him out legally. Turns out on the security camera, while he had me pinned to the wall, he had a knife in his hand. I didn't notice, what with the screaming and God and fish and all that. We did not have to invite him back because of that, and he's currently staying in an insane asylum. Did security overnight for a campground resort a few years back. Had all kinds of run-ins with strange animals. One stands out as the most creeped out I've ever been. My shack was in the entrance to the parking lot. One side of the lot was bordered with trees with a dirt road on the other side. So one night I'm sitting there and I keep hearing this sound. It's hard to describe, but basically it's a cross between a crying baby and a wounded dog trying to bark. It sounded like it was moving up and down the small road, so I got in my patrol jeep to see if I could figure it out, but came up empty. After a few minutes I called the local sheriff's deputy, who I'd come to know by then, and told him what was going on, and that since it's not our property he needed to come by and check it out. He went up and down the road a few times and heard/saw nothing. So we got to talking about what was going on and decided it wasn't terribly serious. As I was telling him that the primary reason I called him is because I thought it might be a cougar getting some lunch and my boss won't let me carry a gun on the premises, we hear the sound coming from across the street behind us. Cue the spotlights. Turns out when two white-tailed deer are having a territorial dispute they bark/hiss at each other. Left both me and the deputy dumbfounded for a few minutes. Not particularly creepy, but when I worked in the LA area I started work as early as possible to avoid traffic, so I usually started between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. It was inconsistent because I worked on installing and servicing control systems all over the city and different places at different starting times. I also had undiagnosed severe sleep apnea and was lucky to get a few hours of sleep every other night or so. 2 to 3 times per week I would find myself giving up on sleep at 1 or 2 a.m. and then heading off to a job site where I would listen to soothing music in my car and hopefully nap an hour or two before work. If I didn't do that there was a good chance of nodding off while stuck in traffic. This left me roaming around the city during the dead lull hours of the night in a half-sleep trance several nights per week. Many people may not realize it, but Metro Los Angeles is completely dead from about 2:30 a.m. until just before 5 a.m. It's like there is a net of silence thrown over the city during those hours. Even the suburbs are more active during these hours and actually have more stores and bars open. It was at these times that I never felt lonelier in my life. Being alone and stuck in a half-asleep state in an eerie gloomy silence in the middle of 10 million people laying in the dark was a creepy feeling for sure. In undergrad I used to work in the little security booths in the dorms, signing in visitors and stuff. I often worked the overnight shifts because they paid better and there wasn't much to do. One night I was in the prime spot where only residents could swipe in. If someone had a visitor they had to use an alternate entrance. So I was relaxing when this super drunk guy gets dropped in front of the booth by an SUV. The guy starts banging on my window and I get out of the booth to let him into the first door. After that was a turnstile, so I physically couldn't let someone in past that without a card to unlock the turnstile. The guy starts drunkenly screaming at me to let him in and I ask him if he has his card. He doesn't and got super belligerent when I told him he needed to walk down to the other entrance BC. I had no way to let him in. He tells me he is on the lacrosse team and I need to let him in. I kept telling him that it's not that I don't want to, but I actually cannot help him. He started banging the glass near the booth, so I quickly jumped back into the booth and locked the door. That's when he whipped his dick out and said he was going to pee. I decided that it was a good time to press the panic button in our booths for when we don't feel safe, and as a 5 feet tall female I was feeling very unsafe. Luckily a minute or so later of him slamming the glass and cussing me out, one of his friends appeared and passed him a swipe card so he could get into the complex. 10 minutes later campus security showed up and I told them what happened. The officer asked if it was a lacrosse player and I said it was. The officer then tells me that the kid I had been caught trying to sexually assault another girl an hour before in the SUV that dropped him off was another campus security officer. So instead of calling the police and arresting this kid, they put him in a position where he could have harmed another student. I quit the job not long after because of shit. I used to work night audit at a kinda shady motel on the outskirts of downtown. The $40/night kinda place. On the whole, the job was pretty easy, though I was on first name basis with most of the local cops and had to break up several fist fights. One night, around 2 a.m., a guy comes in who I have seen before. I remember him because of his crazy eyes. I don't know if he was a meth user, or what, but he looks like he has seen some shit. He walks into the lobby and kinda paces around. Not unusual, he could be picking someone up. I noticed he had a duffel bag, so I put down my paperwork and asked him if he needed any help. He kept looking at our security cameras, but told me he wanted to get a room. Of course he paid cash. I make small talk with him and he's acting super nervous. While making his keys he puts his hands on the counter and looks me in the eye. "I'll give you $200 if you don't tell anyone about what you see tonight." "Ooh, excuse me?" "I'll give you money if you don't tell anyone about what I'm bringing in with me." I more or less mumbled something unintelligible about not being able to take tips. After I handed him his keys he paces around the lobby some more and left. I sat at that desk all night without going into the back office because I wanted to see what the fuck he was going to bring in. He never came back. It's unconfirmed, but someone who I think was him was caught at our sister location on the other side of town with several underage working girls. I worked very late at a BK and one of my coworkers was haunted. Shit always happened when there were a certain 3 of us there after closing, and sometimes when we weren't together. He would see figures and get bit and scratched. He was nail biter, therefore he had no nails to scratch himself and was missing teeth, so the bite marks didn't match him. Utensils and items would move around, sometimes fall even when they were in the middle of a table or counter. One night when I was working with different coworkers and I was in the bathroom. Was washing my hands and could kind of hear 2 of my coworkers arguing. They're best friends and complete opposites and argue often, so I just zoned out for a minute when I heard 3 loud bangs on the wall. At first I thought maybe Charlie, my coworker, was in the office cause it's on the other side of the wall with the sinks. So I walked over to listen to see if he'd do it again, and 2 more. At that point I started freaking out and walked out of the bathroom, asked my coworker at the register if she banged on the wall, and she hadn't. She was helping a customer. I walked back to see my other 2 coworkers in the middle of an argument. Had to try to ask them twice if they did it cause they were intent on their argument. They both looked at me confused and said no and went right back to what they were doing. At that point I started freaking out even more, and for the next 2 hours. While I was there I didn't want to be alone, haha. Another time me and the coworker who was the one haunted were sitting in the parking lot talking as we often did. He was staring in the store at the front counter when he looked like he saw a ghost. He did. Again. But it was the first time for me. Needless to say I didn't sleep very well that night. After that we 3 didn't work together too much, unfortunately. And then stuff stopped happening. It was weird. Maybe had something to do with how we were becoming more and more distant from each other. May. Not a graveyard shift worker, but just encountered something pretty crazy. Family and I were out eating dinner. Over my shoulder I hear the people at the booth behind me talking. Kinda tune them out for a while and continue talking to my family. Then out of nowhere I hear something along the lines of disrespect me like that again and I'll slap you across the face. Eventually one of the two women sitting with the man got up and went outside. He soon said, "Go ahead, go outside, you have no place to go to the other." Most of this was under hushed voice, so I had to try and piece some words together. The second girl then says, "I'm not gonna take this," and leaves. As we get up to pay the bill I see this man sitting at the booth alone. We walk outside and start heading to our truck discussing what we witnessed. We starting getting in and I see the one of the girls sitting on a bench. I told my family I'd BRB and that I was gonna see she needed help. I approach and realize she's about 16 to 18, a little younger than me. I also can see that she's been crying. I asked if she was okay or wanted help. She said she was fine and didn't need anything. So I got in my truck and drove off. I can't help but feel like I should have done something more. The dude was blatantly saying he was going to smack her in the face. That's so f***ed up.